When should you use a medical recruitment or locum company? And when should you not? Find out in this video. Hello YouTubers, I am the Career Doctor and I'm here to help you manage your career. Now, various companies or agencies exist that basically help both the doctors and the employers, the hospitals, the health services to come together and find jobs for those doctors. Sometimes we refer to these companies as locum agencies, although that's actually only technically correct when we're talking about short-term placements for doctors. The people that work at these companies are usually called agents. Now, recruitment and locum agents are not just unique to medicine. There are obviously recruitment companies working in all industries and all sectors. In fact, according to the Recruitment, Consulting and Staffing Association of Australia and New Zealand, which is the peak body that represents recruitment organisations in Australia and New Zealand, 449 of the 2,228 companies registered with that organisation work in the health and medical field. That's about 20%. And the reason is pretty obvious. Demand for both doctors and other health professionals is high and keeps increasing, and the salaries that employers are prepared to pay for doctors in particular are significant. We've pointed out in previous videos that doctors occupy 5 of the top 10 paid occupations in Australia. Recruitment agencies tend to work on a percentage basis model, i.e. if they place someone for a job, then they get a percentage of the hourly rate or daily rate in the case of a locum, or the employment package in the case of a permanent recruitment, which is normally worked out across the first 12 months of employment. And many doctors are also fans of these agents and agencies, and I'll go into that towards the end of this video. But it's worth considering that the normal amounts of pay on offer for a locum role, for example, are significantly higher than one would get as a salaried employee. Trainee doctors tend to get paid on an hourly rate for locums of somewhere between, say, $110 and $150 per hour. But this can go up higher in particular peak periods, such as the Christmas period. When you consider that, for example, a first-year registrar working salaried in New South Wales gets paid around $47 an hour, that's a big difference. Specialists are generally paid for locums based on a daily rate, which tends to start around $2,000 but may go up to, say, $3,000 a day. Now, salaried specialist doctors generally earn somewhere between $900 a day and maybe up to $1,700 a day. So again, there can be a significant difference. So when should you consider working with one of these locum or recruitment agencies? Well, in the next bit of this video, I'm going to give you 3 situations where it's probably not a great idea to work with one of these companies, and another 3 situations where it's probably a good idea to work with these companies. Then we'll finish up with a few key thoughts that you might also want to consider before signing up with a medical recruitment agent. So the first situation where you would probably not want to use a medical recruitment agency is when you're applying for trainee positions in Australia as part of what we call the annual medical recruitment process. And the reason being is fairly simple, and this will be a recurring theme throughout the rest of this video. You see, there are many more candidates than there are positions for these sorts of jobs. In fact, in one recent report looking into the state of the New South Wales annual medical recruitment system alone, which is the biggest recruitment system in our country, there were found to be 45,000 applicants for only 3,600 positions. In many cases, the hospitals and health services will actually only accept direct applications for annual medical recruitment. But let's say you were able to apply via an agency. What would be the benefit in this situation? Firstly, it's not likely that you're needing the agency's help in finding a position. These are fairly well clearly advertised. And then if you're successful in getting the job, the employer will likely have to pay a premium on top of your annual salary, which they wouldn't have to pay for any other candidate. So these premiums actually can be somewhere between 10 and 20% of that overall 12-month package. So that actually might be a disincentive for the employer putting you on. For similar reasons, you would not want to bother engaging a medical recruitment company if you're an international medical graduate seeking a resident position here in Australia. Again, in this scenario, there are just so many more doctors competing for these often scarce positions. So in this scenario, you will probably also find that the recruitment agencies are not that interested in you either. They know that the chances of you obtaining one of these places are fairly limited, so their effort in helping you is pretty hard for them to justify. And because they can't use you as a locum or anything else, it's not really worth their while engaging with you at this point. So again, this is a situation where there's an oversupply in the labour market compared to the jobs available. Now, the third and final scenario where you'll probably not use a medical recruitment company is a little bit different. It may seem obvious to some, but it's probably worth discussing that if you're aware of the hospital that you're applying for already and they're aware of you, you would not generally use a recruitment company. So that would include hospitals and health services you're currently working at, as well as maybe ones you've previously worked at or ones that you have some sort of connection with. The issue here again is that with using a recruitment company, they're actually representing you rather than you using your own personal connections to apply for that job. And again, if you are successful, it's going to cost the hospital more than if you just represented yourself directly, which will annoy them because they know you or know of you already. Now, some of you might be saying, well, this seems fairly obvious and you wouldn't dream of going through a recruitment company to apply for a position at a hospital that you're already working at. But consider this. Here's a scenario when this actually might happen. If you decide that you want to look at new career opportunities, that you're not happy with your current role or you need to progress, and if you decide for yourself that the best way to do that is by engaging with a recruitment company, then the agency is generally within their rights, according to the contract that you would sign with them, to suggest you any position that they think would be good for you. And this includes positions that you could have probably found out about yourself. And generally then, you're either obliged to go through the agency because of that contract, if you'd like to apply for that job, or just pass on it. So if you're thinking of a career change and thinking you want to go through an agency because that might be helpful, it might be more efficient, you might get access to jobs that you're not aware of, it's definitely a good idea to firstly have a look around yourself. Okay, so that's when you wouldn't use an agency. What about when you would or should use one? Well, once again, this again comes down to the issue of supply and demand of doctor labour. As we've highlighted, because medical recruitment companies specialise in linking up doctors with hospitals and health services, they have a competitive advantage in this space. That's what they do. So if a doctor is struggling to find a job, or more importantly, if an employer is struggling to find a doctor, or perhaps the right kind of doctor, the medical recruitment companies tend to excel and do better than the individual doctors searching for themselves, or indeed the health service going direct to the market. So the first situation is clearly locums. Locums, or locum tenens, which means a temporary replacement, has been a traditional role in medicine for hundreds of years really. Hospitals are often needing doctors to step in quickly to jobs to either replace staff shortages or cover for things like resignations. In private practice, particularly general practice, locums are often used to give the GP a break from their practice so that they can take some well-earned leave. Depending on the nature of the role and the urgency, you can earn quite a bit from the right locum appointment. As I've highlighted, it's often 2 times, 3 times, even maybe 4 times the salary that you might be earning with an employer. So you can use locums to generate quite a bit of income in between periods of not working, which may well suit you if you're looking for a bit of a working holiday or a gap year. I've actually spoken to a lot of doctors finishing up their postgraduate year 2 who've decided that they need a bit of a break from medicine, having gone through the transition from medical school into the workplace, and see locums for a year as a good way of doing that before deciding what they want to do next in medicine. Locums can also be a good idea if you're thinking of moving somewhere else and want to try out a few different services to see if they fit well with you. So you both earn a little bit more, which you can use to probably pay off some debts that you might have, but then you can kind of work out a service by trying it out before you buy it. And then because you're working a locum, there's generally a vacancy in that service, and you can decide to apply for a permanent appointment. I often see this in junior consultants who have sort of finished their training and looking for their next consultant job, and so they might take off and do some locums for a while and find a service that they really like that works well for them. Many doctors even manage to turn locuming into a bit of a career, but all this is not without its downside, as I will highlight to you shortly. Now, the second situation that you might probably want to consider using a locum company or a recruitment agency really is when you're moving countries and your skills are in demand. So this situation tends to happen in Australia for specialists, particularly specialists who are working in competent authority countries, as well as certain trainees, again trainees usually working in competent authority countries, just because getting registered from those countries tends to be a little bit easier, and also the recognition of specialist qualifications tends to work a little bit more smoothly. So for example, if you're a psychiatry consultant or a psychiatry trainee from, say, the United Kingdom or Ireland or somewhere like that, you may find that if you engage with a recruitment company and you're interested in working in Australia, they may well be able to find you a position quite easily here and link you up with an employer who's quite interested in taking you on board. The third situation, which you may not have thought about, but where medical recruitment companies kind of really have the edge, is when you're being headhunted. You won't find out about a job that you're being headhunted for unless it's going to be through a medical recruitment company. So hospitals and health services often do headhunt people for more senior roles. And that tends to be around the area where they're looking for a consultant to take on a bit of a leadership and management role. And so they want to see quality, and so they might directly advertise those roles, but they often go through one or two medical recruitment companies or other what's called executive search companies to see if they can increase the candidate pool because they want to get some quality in that particular role. So there are three situations where, in my opinion, it makes sense to go with a medical recruitment agency. What about you? Did that make sense for you? Have you used a medical recruitment agency in the past, and did you use it for other reasons that I haven't covered in this video? I'd be interested to know in the comments below. But before you do sign up with a medical recruitment company, it is worth considering a few key points. The first key point is, which agency are you going to sign up with? If you get on discussion boards like on Facebook, you'll find a lot of people talking about the pros and cons of different recruitment companies. And they do tend to differ in terms of what they focus on. Some will focus more on the locum end of the market, some will focus more on the permanent recruitment side of the market. Some will be quite big and have a lot of resources and be able to do a lot of other things apart from just connecting you up with the employers. Some will be quite small and boutique, and you might get more of a personalised service through that, and you might actually be more comfortable with that. What I generally recommend doing is not signing up with just one initially, but signing up with maybe two or three and seeing how you go with those companies, and then you'll probably be comfortable with one that you tend to stick with, particularly if that's going for regular locums. Another advantage of signing up for more than one company, particularly if you're locuming, is that not every company will have every job on their books. So by going with two or three, you might improve the number of jobs that you're actually getting offered. And that might suit you, particularly if you're particular about where you work or what you work. The second key thing to consider here is, particularly when you're locuming, you're actually working for yourself. So you might need to think about things like setting up your own business, registering for GST, looking at things like income protection. You'll have to think about tax. So actually all that money that you think is extra that you're getting, it is extra, but no tax is coming out of it. And actually when you get on a locum rate, you're often hitting the highest tier of tax in Australia, so it's not as much as you thought it was. When you're working for an employer, they actually take tax out of your pay, so you don't have to worry about it so much. So you're going to have to provision for those sorts of things. So you can often kind of give yourself a bit of a false impression about exactly how much money you're earning, and then when tax time comes around, you can get a bit of a rude shock. Another key thing to consider, that if you are locuming, you are a contractor and you're responsible for your own professional development. When you're working on a training program or working as an internal resident in the hospital, your professional development is generally covered. If you're not a specialist but still working as a locum, then you're going to have to increase your own activity in the professional development realm. And the Medical Board of Australia have recently increased the amount of professional development that they want to see from all doctors. And they've introduced concepts like peer review or performance assessment. So you need to be aware of the rules, because you need to maintain your professional development, not just so that you can keep registered, but also that you keep up to date. I think one of the problems with long-term locuming is if you don't keep up your skills, then they can rapidly diminish and you get out of practice and out of date. The other thing that you need to consider, again, more when you're working as a locum for an agency, is there is a lack of security. The contracts you sign tend to mean that the hospital can pretty much drop you at any point in time, and it's not a guarantee that you're given work. You're kind of a gun for hire. You're getting paid a lot more to fill a gap that they need to badly address, but let's say they bring someone on, they can also say they no longer need you, or what's more often common the case, the sort of need for locums can wax and wane throughout the year. So you might be in a great niche like critical care or psychiatry or even surgery, where they're often needing locums, but you might also be in a niche where the need for locums is a little bit different, and you might have to think about, do you want to extend yourself in other areas to make sure you get the sort of income that you're wanting. So that's another key point to consider. Now, I've summarised a fair bit of this information for you in a blog post that's on our AdvanceMed site. I've also posted there a list of some of the main medical recruitment agents in Australia, should you wish to contact one of these. By the way, we've received absolutely no sponsorship from any agency for making this video, But if you do end up contacting one of them, it would be appreciated if you mentioned that I sent you along. As always, if you like this video, leave me a like in the comments below, or if you have a comment or a question, also leave them below. Subscribe and turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next video.